There are some days the wind still carries her cry, high and thin, like it was stitched to the prairie itself. A sound so frail you might mistake it for a hawk far off in the heat shimmer, except it lingers in the ear, scratching at memory. I heard it first on the day the town gathered in front of Boone's saloon, when the sun pressed down so hard the boards beneath our boots burned through the soles. They'd built a crude platform out of 2 whiskey barrels and a plank. Boone stood on it with his hands on his hips, teeth flashing like a knife's edge. Beside him, wrapped in a threadbare blanket stained deep rust red, was a girl. Not a woman, not yet, her face still soft in the cheeks, eyes wide in that stunned, newborn way. The stain on the blanket wasn't from a beating. It was fresher, rawer, the sort of thing no one wanted to speak of in daylight. She swayed where she stood, too weak to hide the tremble in her legs. A murmur moved through the crowd like wind through dry grass. Men muttering about her size, women clutching their shawls tighter. A boy of about 8 whispered something to his mother. She hissed and pulled him behind her skates. The smell in the air was all dust, sweat, and that iron tang drifting off her like a warning. Boone raised his voice. "All right, folks. This here's a rare offering, young, strong, and in need of a proper home. Who'll start me at $2? The first bid was a joke shouted from the back, sending a ripple of crude laughter through the men. Another voice called higher, and I saw her flinch as if each number was a lash. Her eyes, wide, dark, unblinking, searched the faces before her, finding no anchor. I didn't notice him arrive until the shadow of his horse stretched over the platform. Colt Brannigan, late as usual, swung down from the saddle without a word. He wasn't the kind who needed to make an entrance. His quiet always seemed louder than most men's noise. Broad-shouldered, hat pulled low, a week's worth of dust on his coat. He didn't look at the girl right away, just let his gaze sweep over the crowd like he was measuring each man's worth. Boone grinned. "Well, if it ain't Brannigan. You here to bid? Thought you didn't buy trouble." Colt's eyes flicked to the girl, and for the first time she stopped looking scared, though she didn't look relieved, either. "Just still," he said, low enough that the nearest men had to lean in. "I'll pay the full ask. In coin." The crowd went quiet. Boone's smile faltered. "Full ask $5, Colt. I heard you." No one tried to outbid him. Boone liked a show, but even he knew when a thing was over. He shrugged, took the coins, and stepped aside. "Yours, then." Colt climbed the platform, shrugged off his coat, and draped it over her shoulders. The blanket slipped enough for me to see the fresh linen band around her middle, muddy red. The boarding house keeper must have wrapped her earlier. Colt didn't say a word. He just guided her off the platform and toward his horse, one hand steady at her back. The whispers started up again, sharper this time, slicing through the heat. On the road out of town, she rode in front of him, perched stiff in the saddle. The prairie wind caught at her hair, carrying with it the smell of hay from the far pastures and the faint promise of rain. She spoke first, voice little more than a scratch. "Why'd you buy me? Didn't seem right, leaving you there." She didn't answer, just turned her head enough to watch his hands on the reins, scarred, sunburnt, but gentle in the way they kept her steady when the horse jolted over a rut. They passed a wagon train headed east. A woman riding shotgun stared hard at the girl, lips pinched tight, then looked away as if contact was a sin. Instead of taking her to his ranch, Colt stopped at Maudie Red's. Maudie answered the door with flour on her hands and suspicion in her eyes. "You know what folks will say about this?" she asked after Colt explained. "I know what I'd say back," Colt replied. Maudie's mouth twitched, somewhere between a frown and a smirk, but she stepped aside. She tended to the girl, bathed her, dressed her in a clean shift, put her in the smallest upstairs room. From the hallway, the girl could hear Maudie and Colt talking in low voices. Maudie's tone was wary, Colt's steady. When the door closed behind him, the boarding house felt too quiet, like the hush after a shot. The days that followed were long and heavy. She kept to the kitchen and back garden, helping Maudie peel potatoes, hang washing, scrub floors. Every trip into town was another round of sidelong glances. Mothers drew their children close. Men's eyes lingered too long. The girl learned to keep her chin down. Colt stopped by once or twice a week with flour, beans, and once a bolt of fabric Maudie later turned into a simple dress. He never stayed for supper. He never asked her for anything. But each time he left, he'd meet her eyes like he was checking to make sure she was still there. One afternoon, Sheriff Wiley Craig caught Colt outside the general store. "I was close enough to hear. She's causing talk," Wiley said, chewing on a toothpick. "Workhouse be better for her. Safer. Where girls like her belong." Colt didn't raise his voice. "She belongs where she's wanted." That night, the girl overheard Maudie telling him there were easier ways to live than catching other people's stones. He only said, "I'm not looking for easy." After that, she started to leave small gestures for him: a slice of cornbread wrapped in cloth, a shirt mended where the seam had split. He never mentioned them, but he always accepted. Weeks passed before Boone came back. This time he wasn't alone. 2 ranch hands trailed him, both carrying themselves like men who'd never heard no from anyone they respected. He rode straight to Maudie's and hammered on the door until it rattled in its frame. When Maudie opened it, Boone leaned in, grinning wide enough to show every tooth. "That girl's mine by right. She was traded before Brannigan got her. I'm here to collect." Maudie planted herself in the doorway, voice sharp. "She's not yours, Boone. I ain't asking you." Before Boone could push past her, Colt's voice came from behind. "You'll leave her be." Boone turned, smirk curling. "Brannigan, thought you'd have better sense than to keep what ain't yours. She's not a thing to keep." The words hung there, taut as a lasso about to snap. Boone's smirk soured. "Last warning, step aside." Colt didn't move. Rain clouds had been building all day, and now the first low rumble rolled across the street. Townsfolk had gathered, peering from porches and windows. Boone stepped forward, reaching for the girl's arm where she stood frozen just inside the doorway. Colt blocked him, palm open but solid against Boone's chest. "Don't," Colt said. Boone laughed, mean and short, and went for his revolver. Colt didn't reach for his own. He just stood there, still as fence-post shadow, eyes locked on Boone's. The air tightened. The smell of rain mixed with dust and sweat. Thunder cracked so close it made the horses flinch. Boone's hand twitched, but something in Colt's steady stare stalled him. His grin came back, thinner now. He spat on the boards and stepped back. "You ain't worth the bullet," Boone said, and turned away. His men followed, muttering. The rain came in a sudden sheet, flattening the dust into dark mud. The crowd melted into doorways, and Colt tipped his hat at Maudie before turning to go. The girl reached out without thinking, her hand closing over his. He stopped, glanced down at the fragile fingers curled around his own, and for a moment neither moved. I can still see them there, 2 figures in the downpour, one offering a hand, the other anchoring it in place like it mattered more than breath. And maybe it did. Now, when I tell it this way. Sometimes salvation don't come wrapped in a preacher's words. Sometimes it's a coat over your shoulders, a voice that won't back down in the street. And if you're lucky, it stays with you, long after the storm passes, like the smell of rain on dust, rising up from the earth to remind you you're still here.